In the Company of Charity is a podcast by the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. Each episode will be discussing the church, society, and service to others, all through the lens of the spirit we received from St. Vincent de Paul, the Saint of Charity. Join in the conversation by sending your comments and questions to companyofcharity@gmail.com.
Well, everyone, we welcome you back to the Daughters of Charity's podcast, In the Company of Charity. And as always, I'm so delighted to be here with my co-host, Sister Liz Sjoberg. And how are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much. I am very excited about this episode that we have in store for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it too. So this is an interview that I did with a friend of mine, Sister Ellen LaCapria. Sister Ellen and I have known each other, I don't know, probably going on 15 years now. It feels like a long time. But I, over the years have learned a lot about her. We worked together as vocation directors. She kind of taught me what I needed to know when I became the vocation director full time. She preceded me. And she's just been a good friend in community. Not someone that I see and talk to all the time, but every time I do, she's like one of those people you feel like you just start the conversation right where you left off, that you catch up on things, catch up on news, and then just go from there. So I was really happy to be able to do this interview with her. And I learned a lot more about her in the process. It was really fascinating. You think you know someone, you've learned about them in conversation and just, getting to know them. And then you realize we've got so much depth to us as human beings that you start to learn a lot more about how God has really worked in someone's life. And one of the things we focus on in this interview is a beautiful, beautiful gift that Ellen has been given. She's just a talented person. She's a great artist and has done some really remarkable work within the community, Vincentian art, paintings and drawings and just different kinds of expression of Vincentian charism and Vincentian saints. To hear her talk about her art, this gift, this talent that she has, as well as the way God has used that throughout her life and the different missions that she's been on, it's really, really remarkable. And it gave me, just a deeper appreciation for her integrity as a daughter of charity, her love for her vocation, and love for the Vincentian charism. So it was really a wonderful interview for me to do. I hope everyone is going to enjoy it. I think they'll enjoy her a lot. She's a great person.
I think one of the things, it's very interesting when you have these individuals who have such an amazing, beautiful talent and gift that it's sometimes they can become known as, oh, that's that sister who is the artist, or that's that sister who's the poet, or that's that sister who's an amazing vocalist. And the thing about that is there's such a depth to her and to individuals like that I think we get to touch on in little areas in this interview. And I'm really glad for that, because there's a tendency to put people in a box and label them as whatever it is we want to label them as.
Yeah.
But in this case, we get to hear how God's plan for her unfolded. And it wasn't something, oh, well, she had to give that up, so to speak, when she became a sister. And I think God really honors those talents and those interests that people have in whatever life you choose, whether you're a parent or a single person or missionary or a sister, brother, priest, etc. Your life's calling is one thing, but those gifts and talents that we have, God wants to incorporate that into whatever. And to see that he was able to incorporate that even into being on a board of a hospital.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's just wild.
That's one of my kind of favorite parts of the interview, is just learning about what can seem like some really basic missions that a sister would be on, as a nurse, as a member of a board, a hospital, as, just doing different things. And you think, okay, well, these are the kinds of things sisters do. And then when you realize the way that God used this talent of hers, this ability to see in this artistic way, just really brought life to those missions in ways that, someone without those gifts would have maybe done something a little bit different, but she just brought a finesse or something to it that's just pretty amazing, I think, and not expected in a lot of ways.
I don't want to jinx myself, but I hope that the Lord does not call me to be a vice president for mission of a hospital. I just am praying for that. I reject that, whatever.
Yeah, but you could sing your way through, you play your guitar and you just, you use your talent in other ways. But I think it is the way that God just surprises us, that and asks us to use our whole selves in any mission that he gives us, that none of the gifts that we've been given are exclusively for us. I think that's something, I always think about, I never can find it. I have to get one of our Vincentian translators and historians to help me find this quote from St. Vincent, or at least it's a concept I remember maybe from the seminary, that, St. Vincent would say, you're entitled to bed, food, clothing, but that everything else belongs to the poor, including the graces and gifts of prayer, that everything you are belongs to God and belongs to the poor. And so you don't get to hold back, like my prayer relationship with God, when I'm in that conversation where I feel close to God, whatever graces I receive are there to strengthen me to be a better daughter of charity, not just to wallow in it or get excited about it and say, oh, that was really great, God, but that it's really, how does this help me to be a better servant? And I think that's what I really learned from some of Ellen's story, was that, as a daughter of charity, that Sister Ellen used all of that for the service of the poor in a very authentic way that daughters of charity are called to do, to just bring our whole selves, to use every gift we've been given because they belong to God, who appears to us in those who are poor, those who are suffering, and that all that we have is to bring them comfort and to ease their suffering in whatever way we can.
And we'll have to post online some of her artwork, just to remind people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Get a peek into that.
Yeah.
But we hope everybody enjoys this interview, and just remember, God's will be done. Everybody's got gifts and they are meant to be used, and this is a great example of it.
I'm Sister Elizabeth, and I'm in the pleasure and in the company of Sister Ellen LaCapria today. Ellen, I'm so glad to see you, and I'm so glad you agreed to this interview today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's good to be here. I really appreciate you asking me to contribute to this podcast.
Well, we've been picking the most interesting people we can find, and you were one of those people. So just kind of, as we always say, kind of disclaimer, Ellen and I worked together as in vocation work. Ellen was the vocation director, and I was kind of the vocation trainee, I think. And I followed her in vocation work, and she was a great mentor to me. So I'm especially delighted to have you here today. So we're going to talk today about not vocations, although all things, I think, bring us toward a sense of our purpose in life, a sense of the vocation, what God has called us to, and not just called us to, but given us the gifts to fulfill in the world and for His glory. I mean, that's, I think, what we're here to do, really, is to use what He's given us to the best of our ability, and I think you've done that in so many ways. And so we're going to talk today about a special gift that you have, and that is how you've discovered in your life and have really contributed in community to the use of creativity, or the creative arts specifically, in ministry. So can you start us off and talk a little bit about how you got started with this? And I think we're going to try to cover the aspects both professionally, spiritually, and what that looks like in ministry. So so just get started and use your energy with this.
Great, that sounds great to me. I actually started dabbling in the arts when I was in high school, when I realized I actually could draw, and I got an art degree at, started off getting an art degree before I found the Daughters of Charity, and that kind of drew me a little bit more powerfully than my profession as an artist. So I did enter the community thinking I might never again use my art. I would use it for myself personally, but not, how I had an image or a vision, since I really didn't know sisters before I entered, of what sisters did or didn't do. So, I was not a nurse or a teacher or a social worker, but I created things, both visually and other ways. And so to my great surprise, after my formation, when I was asked to go back and finish my undergraduate degree, I was asked to get my degree in secondary art education. And I was like blown away. Oh my gosh, I can actually use my art.
Yeah.
And
can I stop? Just
Sure.
how long ago was this?
Oh, that
If
was
you don't mind me asking.
I don't mind. It was around 1978. It's about 40 plus years ago.
Yeah, and I as you know, I entered in 1996 and was a delayed vocation in many ways. But I'm always fascinated when I hear stories that sisters tell about, I didn't know if who I was going to be accepted or used,
Exactly.
or if I was going to have to conform. And consistently I've found in the Daughters of Charity, and I think what drew me to them initially was that they kind of meet you where you are, you
Yes.
know, and use the gifts you have. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that I figured you certainly had a knowledge of your own artistic abilities before, but I'm delighted to hear that. Yeah. So go on.
So I went ahead and got my undergraduate degree and taught high school for 1 year. It was actually art and religion. But the second thing I'm going to say really kind of goes back or heads towards a future use of my creative talents. So at that time in our community, they really were encouraging sisters to get into the health field, whether as nurses or administrators. And I had volunteered to be available, thinking at one point I wanted to be a physical therapist. And I thought, well, maybe they'll ask me to do that. But asked me to go back to school to get my nursing degree, which I did.
So you were a teacher
For 1 year.
For 1 year, and then you said, "Oh, I'm available to be a nurse."
Right.
Which,
Well,
really?
no, I actually didn't want to be a nurse.
You wanted to be a physical therapist
Or something
or
in
something
health.
like that in health, but not specifically a nurse. And then you said yes to being a nurse, and art and your creative talents have just kind of carried you through all this as well. So
For the most part, because in the back of my head I was thinking maybe I can use my art talent somewhere in the healing profession, even before I knew there was something called art therapy, because my future leads me to that as another kind of avenue to use my creativity. But so, I went back to school, got my nursing degree, nursed for about 4 or 5 years, loved home care nursing and a couple other things, but I actually realized that pure nursing is not really my talent. That's a side of the brain that's very different from the side of my brain that I use more strongly, and that is sort of the intuitive creative. And that's probably why I loved home care, because it was more psychosocial.
yeah.
But other fields in nursing, I was uncomfortable. But luckily, it was a time when the community again wanted to invest in me and sent me to graduate school. And I discovered something called art therapy. And it was like an eureka moment. It was like I'm taking my medical background and my love for medicine. I kind of like science, even though it wasn't my natural strength. And of course my creativity and my artistic talent. And blending the two, I was able to work with folks who were both mentally ill, some who were incarcerated, others who were drug addicted, mainly adults, doing something that we call art psychotherapy. And I also met with some people private practice for a while.
Wow, this is really pretty cool. I've known you for a while, and I've always known you as the artist in the community. One of the few, and one who's blessed the community with so much of your art focused on Vincentian saints, and and have always known this other side, kind of, but never really understood it as your ministry. So So yeah, this is great to hear this, and what a journey.
Yes.
It's amazing to me where we come in community, in the structure of things that seem
Exactly.
sometimes restrictive, and yet you realize when you're in a community like the Daughters of Charity, I guess any community that has its heart set on using the gifts of every sister to be of service to those who need it the most. There's something, we all break out of the mold a little and take the risk of letting somebody kind of go in an area that others might not understand. So I imagine you experience some of that as well. But
but then also going in areas that I feel initially somewhat unprepared for. Again, I love working with some of the very poorest and sickest folks, adults who had mental health issues. That was a real passion for me. But again, availability is part of my vocation, my vows.
Exactly.
So I was asked to do, as you mentioned earlier, vocation work.
Yes.
Out of the blue. So I was like part-time at the hospital where I was working and part-time vocation. And that to do 2 part-time jobs is really doing 2 full-time jobs. So I was moved to a different city in order to just do vocation work full-time. And I did that for about 6 years. But as things go, I was thinking, oh yes, I'm going to get right back into art therapy. I can't wait.
Right.
But again, God called me in a whole different direction. And literally, it was God's call because I wouldn't have chosen it. I was asked to be the vice president for mission integration, which is a position in our hospitals. As we become fewer sisters in a hospital, it's to help keep the mission of the hospital for serving those poor and vulnerable alive, ethics are a big piece of it, spiritual care for patients. So for about almost 10 years, I held that position. And I learned a lot. So I can't say that those 10 years were wasted by no means. And I was still able to do some other art, creative things, which I'll allude to in a minute during that time.
Right.
But primarily, I was doing administration for 10 years.
Yeah.
Not my thing, totally.
Yeah, and I remember some of those years too, and I guess for those who are listening who may not always, when you're not in this life and understand how people move around and what we do take on some very unique positions, that availability, our own availability, but also the availability of the community to say, yes, we have sisters who will do this. And certainly in healthcare, maintaining the charism of St. Vincent de Paul, maintaining the charism of service to those who are poor, and certainly being women of the church, as Elizabeth Ann Seton would always call us, to be women of the church, that's a very unique position and one that is of great value in a hospital, to have someone who kind of keeps the rudders, keeps the ship going on the straight and narrow in some ways, but also I think being able to see the signs of the times and the signs within the church and how things change and how things ever stay the same. So it's a great position, but again, I can see when you look at your journey, you all of a sudden end up in this administrative position where art, again, I think, from what I'm hearing you say, kind of doesn't take a back burner.
No, it doesn't.
But it continues to be your lifeblood, like what guides you as you move forward. So so then you do this for 10 years.
Well, I was in a unique position at the hospital where I was working because my CEO really tapped into my talents. She was a very bright woman, and she knew that administration was not really in finances my strong suit. But
and this was which hospital were you in?
St. Agnes in Baltimore.
Okay.
But she recognized that I had a gift to be able to take things that are contemporary and put our mission, vision, values, spirituality into it, doing video prayers or doing some kind of creative outlet at board meetings. I loved working with our board members, trying to help them understand our love for service and our commitment to the church, and also our saints that you mentioned. Loved working with the physicians, and those are 2 areas where when I left where I missed that a lot, because to me I felt like I could bring, instead of doing a prayer that was pretty much out of a book, I would take a contemporary song that most people were used to, and I would put slides of the people in the hospital, or I'd put quotes that were speaking to who we were in our brochures and in our mission statement. I also was able to help contribute to a beautiful renovation of a new wing that had a lot of history and artifacts from the past to tell our story. So that was a really important moment.
Yeah.
But again, life and God intervenes. You know, St. Vincent talks about divine providence.
Yes,
and my life has very much been driven by providence because my mom, who has dementia, was needing more and more care. She lives with my brother. And so I needed to be closer in distance to her to help take care of her part-time. So one of our high schools, Elizabeth Seton High School in Bladensburg, was a place where the president there asked if I would be able to come to help her to do their graphic arts for their digital graphics for all kinds of brochures and fund development.
Right.
So I could do that as well as help take care of my mom and do other things in between. I want to just backtrack one minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about how I was able to sustain using art during those times, and some of it was a personal desire to just prayer through my art. Mandalas are something I did, which are basically drawings in a circle that are very centering. There's a whole philosophy and theory behind it, which I won't go into. That's a whole
I remember you doing these, and I used to tease you about not another mandala. But the mandalas are great. In fact, just to interject a little, when I was at Daybreak, the homeless day center that I helped to open in Macon, Georgia, before we actually were open, we would bring people down to this facility, and we didn't have anything really for them to do. And someone brought us one of these adult coloring books, and it had nothing but mandalas in it. And many of the participants there, some mentally ill, homeless people, would do these mandalas. And they were tacking them all over the walls and on the rafters, and I thought of you often because of the mandalas. But just so you know, those things that you interjected into the community by me at this time was effective in other ways.
Now the next step would be to give them a blank circle and then just let them explore with colors and shapes and lines. But so I was also doing some of my own art and prayer. I was doing some workshops in both Vincentian spirituality as well as art retreats and things like that. So I did utilize my creativity even after I moved away from a job that was artistic or art. So that was kind of one area where I could continue to dovetail my professional and my personal or spiritual life into one. So presently I am continuing to do the digital graphics and just love moving away from, now there are different strands of thought about using real materials like pencils and crayons that are tactile versus using the computer. Both for simplicity and movability and expense, digital graphics are wonderful. Although the expense kind of exponentially goes up when I start printing off the pictures that I've done. And,
because unfortunately printing hasn't caught up with the technology. Color printing is still ridiculously expensive.
But I love creating things with the computer, and I love also helping people understand that really everybody can create. They might not be a polished graphic artist, or just artist in general, but every person has the ability to create something. And that's a firm belief as an art therapist. In my own personal life, that's a conviction of mine. So I love when folks want to learn how to do stuff. I'll spend a lot of time with them because to me it's a value if I can share what gives me energy and helps me sustain myself and the gifts that God has given me to help someone else do that. That's a win-win situation. So I'm most grateful for that.
I agree. It's funny, when I think back to my early days in community, in the late 1990s, and seeing some of your art come forward. They were beginning to present it a little bit more, and say, oh, I know her, and a couple of other artists in the community who were doing sculpting and other kinds of art. I remember in the seminary, which is kind of our novitiate, we were encouraged to do some art expressions, and we always, if you aren't artistic, you think I can't.
Right.
The one thing is I can't even draw a straight line, and I realized very quickly from the encouragement of artists like yourself and others that art is not about straight lines.
Exactly.
In fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's about just putting some expression down. And so my own feeble attempts, I think I think I may have even been in one of your retreats.
I think you were, yes.
I don't know if it was at the seminary or if when we were under 10s, maybe in that later part of formation.
Yes.
That you did a workshop with us, and we were doing more collage kind of thing. That was always my thing, was these collages that expressed poetry,
Right,
which is
right.
which is my thing, which is the way in which I use that artistic mode of writing to express myself, but realizing visual as well as words as well as music, all of it kind of goes together. And it sounds like those are the kinds of things that you used these board retreats and retreats with the sisters. So are you doing any of that kind of work now, or is it mostly what you're doing at the high school? So
presently, I'm not doing that specific type of workshop, which again, just a little plug for Creative Process. That's a place where you can really dive deep into the inner of your soul and being versus staying in your head and kind of superficial. I have a lot of faith in the process that helps us use both our sides of our brain. But actually right now, besides working at the high school and have a leadership role in the house where I'm living, I'm also involved in 3 healthcare boards, 2 of them in Texas and 1 in Silver Spring. And someone will probably say, an artist? I absolutely love working with the board members and kind of looking at, so maybe all along there was that side of my brain that I had in operation, but I just genuinely enjoy being on board of directors to help, again, keep us awake to what is our spirit and our vision and our kind of mandate to serve those who are most in need and who are really suffering in our society. So actually I do that now, and some of my own personal art a little bit, and the graphic art, and taking care of my mom, and a leadership role in my house. So that pretty much encompasses what I'm doing now.
A lot.
What's interesting, if you really listen to the story, it all really does sew together into one cohesive quilt or piece.
Yes.
So just, someone said, well, you were this and then you did that, and you're the only sister I know that's been in every profession of, but it fits together.
Yes, yeah. Well, I can see in the way that now as a board member, having had experience in hospital administration,
exactly.
Also having had experience on hands-on nursing, and experience as a teacher, when you weave those professional pieces along with you're developing modes of expression, artistically speaking, through just kind of your own expression, and then wanting to teach others, and then using it in prayer, and that they do go together, and dovetail in the sense that those administrative and more professional help you to sit around a table with other administrators and professional people, understand where they're coming from. This is their life's work.
Yes.
But also to be able to interject for them, I think, the desire within themselves to find their own creative side, however that manifests itself, whether it's in seeing or hearing or speaking, however their creative energies come, because it's only in that creativity we know that the real service happens. Because as Vincent said, we have to be inventive into infinity.
Exactly, my favorite saying.
Yeah, and if we don't give people the ability to invent, to recognize inventing comes out of creativity and the desire to make something better than, be more beautiful than, bigger than, greater than, whatever it is, different from. then the infinity doesn't happen. It gets stagnant. And so I agree. I can see the way God's providential plan for you, for the community, for the service that you've been involved in has really been woven together in a way that's quite beautiful, and only God could happen.
I want to go back to one other thing about working with the board members. These are folks who are bankers, and they're physicians and accountants, and this is not to categorize people or put them in buckets, but community organizers and all kinds of folks who are, professional standing in their community. And when you walk into a sacred setting to give prayer or to help someone pray in a certain way, you don't know how it's going to be received. But what's most gratifying for me is when I do one of these more contemporary prayerful experiences, and I leave a space where folks can respond to how, what did that say to them or speak to them, and to hear some of the profound, really profound answers or thoughts that these individuals bring. And if one starts and someone else will jump in.
Right.
And to me, that's like, okay, that to me is like worth more than tons and tons of money and all kinds of other things. It's just really a special way of saying, okay, God has given me something that I'm able to give to another, and then I get back that much more by their answers, and sometimes it just blows me away. So that part I really cherish.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think it is easy, not easy, but easy in the sense that we could come, we as sisters, I think anyone who comes with that role of being the spiritual guide, and that's how I think a lot of people want us to be, because they're not always comfortable with that. And so I think it's beautiful, one, that you talk about kind of creating that space where it's not a prayer that locks them into one particular thing, but allows them to express themselves. Because I imagine around this table, as you say, there's diversity, totally.
Yes.
And so people's
absolutely.
life experiences, their faith experience, their work experience, all very, very different. But their experience of sitting at that table, or the one thing that is a commonality, is their care for those who are most in need, for the sick, who this hospital, or whatever setting it is, in that sense, that has the responsibility for, and to be able to create that space in which they can express how God fits, however they see God, even how God manifests to them. And it can encourage the others to say, oh, I didn't know that it was going to be okay to say that.
Exactly.
That this is a safe space in that term of just letting people express that. And as you say, we certainly don't come ever to the table knowing all of it. We definitely we learn so much from the lay people that we work with, and from our own sisters, from each other, that if we don't create those spaces, we'll just always be diminished we'll never grow, that's for sure. I thank you so much for the interview today. I've learned some things about you I didn't know before, and have been strengthened in my admiration and respect for you. So again, thanks for being in the company of Charity.
Thank you so much for asking me. Appreciate that.
All right.
And now it's time for your Vincentian Pulse. Hey everybody, Sister Liz here. I wanted to share with you a fun fact about our foundress, St. Louise de Marillac. She liked to paint and often created beautiful images of the heart of Jesus. One of them is a very large painting at our mother house in Paris, which she entitled The Lord of Charity. It's Jesus with his heart exposed. Interestingly, these images that she painted, that one and others, were created several decades before St. Margaret Mary's vision of the Sacred Heart. This notion of Jesus' heart is often reflected in the writings of St. Louise, teaching us and talking to us about communion, charity, a burning zeal for souls and for the poor. As daughters of charity, having the heart of Christ is so important to us, that is reflected in our community seal and our motto, "The charity of Christ crucified urges us." So I pray for all of us that we can put on Christ and ask that he can make our hearts like his. God bless.
This has been In the Company of Charity podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.